Hello and welcome to Here Comes the Bride, the Church Begins. We are at devotional number 48. Devotional number 48, I believe. We are studying the book of Acts and we are in chapter 19, verse 35. Hello, I'm Jim Devore. I'm the pastor of Cornerstone Church of Littlerock in Southern California. And we are in the middle of a story here in the book of Acts. So chapter 19, beginning in verse 21, Paul is in Ephesus. He's been there for several weeks, even months, and he has been strengthening the believers, encouraging the believers, causing many others to come to Christ, and people are forsaking their old ways or forsaking their old gods, their idols. They're burning witchcraft-related things. They're getting rid of anything that looks like they're worshiping something else and following something else besides Jesus. And so that's up to verse 20. Beginning in verse 23, okay, we've got the people who make the idols suddenly losing business because people are not only forsaking and dumping and burning up their idols, but they're not buying the new ones, okay? So these guys decide they want to get Paul kicked out of town, but they decide not to go with the money route. Oh, poor is us, we're losing money to Paul's business, okay? So they decide to say that, the real problem is not that they're losing money, but the real problem is that Artemis, the god who they create idols for, is going to be defamed and left alone and worthless and unable to defend herself. And so out of religious grounds, they're trying to get Paul and company kicked out of town to stop their preaching and what they're doing. So they create a mob scene, and two of the men who came with Paul from Macedonia now to Ephesus, okay, they get drug into the middle of an arena, into a theater as they call it, and they're threatened. And even when they try to defend themselves, they're booed and hollered at. And in the end of verse 34, it says, when they recognized that he, Alexander, was a Jew who was about to defend himself, for about 2 hours they all cried out with one voice, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. So they're just screaming about their God and drowning out this guy. Okay? All right. Verse 35, we pick up the story. Okay? And when the town clerk had quieted the crowd, he said, men of Ephesus, who is there who does not know that the city of the Ephesians is temple keeper of the great Artemis and of the sacred stone that fell from the sky? That's the story of Artemis, that a stone falls from the sky, and that's why you set the location of the temple there. Seeing then that these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rash. So in other words, hey, this is the place of the goddess, let's not get carried away. Surely she can take care of herself. For you have brought these men here who are neither sacrilegious nor blasphemers of our goddess. So far they haven't actually said our goddess isn't a god. They haven't done anything wrong, though they have said follow Jesus only. So basically they're saying that, but not enough to create a problem. Remember that in Ephesus, this Greek city, many religions were okay. Many gods were okay. So they, at this point, all they know is Paul and the company is that they're presenting another god. What they don't realize at this point yet is that the people who are coming to Jesus are learning that he's the only God and you got to forsake all the rest. Okay? All right. Okay. If therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, okay, Demetrius is the guy who rallied all the craftsmen who make the false idols and the statues and make their money off it, okay? So they're the ones that cause this problem. So if therefore Demetrius and the craftsmen with him have a complaint against anyone, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. Don't break the law by killing these guys, persecuting these guys, hurting these guys. Let's go through the due process of the law first, okay? So let them bring charges against one another. They need to have a legitimate charge, okay? You just can't have a mob rule here, okay? It's called civilization. Unlike we are now experiencing thanks to social media and riots and things like that. Mob rule is running the country and running the vote makers, okay? So we've lost we're very civil online about our civil unrest and about our using mob rule, but we're in a shame culture. We're in a noise-making culture to try to get things done. That's exactly what Demetrius and the silversmiths are trying to do. They didn't think they could do it through the regular channel, so let's make a big mob scene. Let's get a bunch of people involved. Let's cause the rulers to be nervous. Oh, what happens if we go against the crowd? See if we can get laws changed that way. So we get to verse 39. At the end of verse 38, let them bring charges against one another. But if you seek anything further, it shall be settled in the regular assembly. In other words, this mob rule is not going to work, okay? For we really are in danger of being charged with rioting today. Well, yep, they were in danger of. They were actually doing it. Since there is no cause that we can give to justify this commotion. And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. So he said, break it up. Break up the crowds. We're done with this. Rioting's not how we're going to handle it. If you want to accomplish something, then we're going to do this the legal manner through the courts. That's the way a civilized country operates and works, okay? Chapter 20. Here we go. After the uproar ceased, Paul sent for the disciples, and after encouraging them, he said farewell and departed for Macedonia. So everything split up. Everything got dispersed. Paul called the disciples who were challenged, threatened, concerned, maybe been a little hurt in the process. Maybe they're going to go to jail possibly now, okay, but we don't know for sure, or could be court stuff put against them. Paul gathers them, encourages them, and then he leaves. He doesn't hang around to face the music, okay? Why? Because he's got a different call in his life at this point. He's not running tail between his legs. He's not running scared. He's just following God's call in his life. Such a reminder that constant agitation is not always what God is calling us to do. Yes, sometimes we need to agitate, but sometimes we just need to move on, okay? All right. So here we go. We're not going to hear again anything about what actually happened in this situation. However, Paul does bring up the guy later. Demetrius says he's not trustworthy, obviously, and he's done great harm, obviously. So there's a hint that Demetrius pulled off his coup in a legal manner and caused some problems to happen, but we really don't know the details. Because why? Because there are 1,000 stories that take place around the times of Scripture that we don't always get the answer for. And so the Scripture is not here to give us the answer to every event, every reason, every cause. The Scripture is here to tell us that this is the story of God bringing salvation to mankind, and here's how he did it. And specifically in Acts chapter 19 into Acts chapter 20, it's how he does it through the church and the working of the Apostle Paul. And so that is so critical for us to realize that, you will have many unanswered questions in your life, many events that you aren't able to solve, many stories that you don't get to the end to. But the story you want to get to the end to is, what is Jesus Christ doing in your life? How is he directing? How is he leading? And what should you do next as a result of that? Worry about your story. Focus on your story and pray for God to be intervening and changing the stories of those around you. I think it's a good point for us to wrap up today. A whole lot of confusion in a city event, and the Scripture doesn't even bother to wrap it all up and put it in a nice tiny package for us. Kind of leaves us hanging. Sounds like life, doesn't it? What do? We do what Paul did, and we say farewell to who we got to say farewell to, and we depart and head for where we've got to depart to. There may not be a physical leaving. It may be just a matter of you saying, I'm done with this event. I can't seem to solve it. I can't seem to bring an end to it. I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to depart from this incident, from this situation, from this friendship, from this frustration, and I'm going to move on to where God is now leading. Think that through. Talk to some friends. Pray with them. Seek the leading of the Lord. Maybe you need to let go of something that's completely undone with a whole bunch of loose ends, a whole lot of unanswered questions, and you just need to move on because you can clearly see that God's leading in a direction you need to go to, even if what's behind you seems a little unraveled. All righty. We'll pick up this story. We'll pick up with Acts chapter 20 when we return to Here Comes the Bride. The church begins.